You guys ready for this? Ready for this look? We are in the last day of this 5-day series. Your sweet cravings called, and they're ready to spill the tea. And today, the last day, is probably going to be your favorite because I'm hoping this is super short. But also, this is the video that's going to have a lot of tips, a lot of tricks, and a lot of ways for you to start implementing. Okay? This is not a place for you to just learn a bunch of stuff or just have it go in your ear and out. This is meant to be a place where you can take in some bits of information, relate it to your life. Aha, yeah, I know what I said about myself. Aha, yeah, that makes sense. When you get that aha moment, that's your sign. And then this is a place for you to have action steps to implement this into your life. So long are the days of just absorbing information without any sort of integration and implementation, okay? So when you find yourself absorbing information, the best way is to apply those action steps, if they give them, into your life, okay? Today is all about that. I hope you have enjoyed so far these past 4 days, and I recognize these glasses make me look like a goon, but I have been in front of my screen majority of this day. And so this is a hack for not only my blood sugar, but for my nervous system and for my circadian rhythm, and to help me with every other bit of my health, okay? Remember we talked about blue light yesterday? Okay. All right, so we now know that your sweet cravings are tied to your blood sugar, which is tied to your liver function, which is tied to your gut health, which is tied to your gallbladder function, which is tied to your bowel motility and movement, bile motility and movement, also bowel, right? Which is also tied to your high stress or your lack of stress resiliency, which is also tied to your poor nourishment and feeding habits and patterns, and snacking and going too long without meals and not resting and digesting, and also tied to sunlight or lack thereof natural light and lack of movement and exercise, okay? So if we wanted to dive in a little bit more deeper for specific things for you, aside from just listening to biofeedback and symptoms from your body, probably time to do some blood glucose testing to actually get a finger prick device for yourself to start testing and getting some data and information, not to judge, not to critique yourself, but to just get insight into, I'm curious to see what this says about me, and whatever it brings up, I am very curious to see how I can implement and support this. How can I add this to my life? Rather than feel like this is taking away something from me, rather than doing this to see something that's wrong with me, that's not the approach that we're going into this. So you can get a finger prick device and just do it yourself at home. A lot of people like those continuous glucose monitors, which can be good. I've also heard some issues with that not being totally accurate, so neither here nor there. You could also do some blood testing. Go to a LabCorp center. You can go ask your doctor to pull some of these for you. Those are just some ideas to kind of get some insight into what is actually happening and what your specific patterns are. And I also want to mention something about an account that I mentioned the other day. When she is sharing all of how her blood glucose responds to different things that she does, that is her own bio-individual. That doesn't mean how she responds to something is how you will respond to something, because guess what? All 20 different things that I mentioned influence blood sugar. You are completely different, so what works for one person doesn't mean it'll work for you. So it's high time you find out what you truly feel, what you are truly experiencing, and what works for you. And the only way to know is to test and trial for yourself. Not take blanket advice and apply it to yourself just because that helps somebody's blood sugar. There are so many different factors which makes that person completely different in a completely different system than you. And that's important to note. Discernment. Remember, I mentioned at the very beginning of this, discernment is important. Okay, so if you were looking to get some blood test done, there are some good markers that you can look at for assessing this for yourself, which would be A1C, which kind of looks at how well your blood glucose has been managed the last 3 months. You could look at CRP levels. That will tell you some inflammation markers to see maybe how much inflammation is playing a role in your blood sugar response. You could look at fasted insulin as well as fasted glucose. You can look at triglycerides, cholesterol levels, and some liver enzyme values such as AST or ALP, and even alkaline phosphatase can kind of give you insight into how your liver is doing if it's being a little bit sluggish or burdened, which has an influence on your ability to regulate your blood sugar levels. So for a fasting blood sugar level, you're kind of looking to find somewhere in between a 70 to 90. Now, if you're outside of this, don't worry. Don't worry. This is a place for you to start to see, how could I improve this? How can I support this better rather than feeling defeated, like I mentioned? So there's a lot of ways that you can manipulate. There's a lot of ways you can alter your foods, take some of these tips and tricks and apply it for yourself. That is some deeper work that you could do working alongside with somebody so that you can kind of get more idea of the deeper rooted things within this, causing some blood sugar imbalances and trying to tighten these up a little bit more so that your health starts working for you, right? And this is something that you could do in deeper work with me. I probably said it about 1 million times on here, but there's a reason for that. This can make a huge impact in the way you experience your life and your health and vitality. For a post-meal glucose reading, we're kind of looking at 100 to 120. And when you can start to align these with different meals, right? When you're testing before a meal and you're testing a couple hours after a meal, it's important to correlate that with a meal that you had so you can start to see what shifts and changes you can make with your nutrition and how you eat your meal, and even the order of what you eat your meal to see how we can influence that and bring that up to respond better. That is also the work that we could do together. So I'm going to dive into some ways to support blood sugar with some supplements, with some nutrition. We've talked about how you eat your meals and things like that, but also with movement and some little things to throw into your meal to kind of boost it. So some supplements that can help, you might be surprised, but cinnamon, a spice like cinnamon, has actually been supportive of helping with blood sugar levels. But I want to caution, if you are somebody who is typically hypoglycemic, so you're typically too low of blood sugar, you might want to tread very lightly on these supplements because we don't want to bottom you out even further. So again, discernment is key. Finding out what is for you is important, and it can change a lot of things for you. Inositol, a lot of my PCOS girlies probably know a lot about inositol to kind of help regulate blood sugar levels, since some people can tend to be insulin resistant depending on what type of PCOS they have. If you didn't know, there's kind of 4 different types. You probably don't know that, and you probably were just diagnosed with it just because you had irregular periods and a few other things, right? Berberine is a really, really great herb supplement that you can use that has been matched to its effectiveness with metformin. And again, sadly, a lot of women are just given metformin, which is a prescription, which is a medication that has to be processed and metabolized by the liver, and a lot of people have sluggish livers, which is why these problems are presenting in the first place. So this time's to kind of get them into a continuous loop of not ever really scratching the surface of how good they can feel. Whereas berberine isn't really depleting of vitamins and minerals like metformin can, and it's interesting that metformin, because of causing these deficiencies in vitamins and minerals, also happens to produce issues with bacteria in the gut, which is why you continue to see problems with PCOS having bacterial imbalances within their gums, within their gut microbiome, or within their vaginal microbiome. It all makes sense. Other things like ginger and cilantro can be really supportive for helping with blood sugar, as well as arugula. Arugula is really good for helping with bile flow. And if you want to think about supporting our liver, is bitter is better for the liver. So that is mustard greens, that is arugula, that is I can't think of some other things right now, but think like lemon juice. That is all supportive of kind of adding some bitterness to the foods that you eat so that we can help stimulate the liver, clear some things out so we can do its job really well, and also support that blood sugar balance, right? And basil is another herb that you could use to start dropping in some meals to kind of help support with blood sugar. And another important part is some teas you can use. There is a lot of ways that drinking tea with your meal, because remember we talked about trying not to have water, a bunch of water with your meal, because it will dampen and it will inhibit the strong and the resilience of your stomach acid levels. So having tea with your meals versus a bunch of water can help your blood sugar so much, help you digest your meals better, which all around impacts everything else. You can dabble into specific kinds of tea. I typically like dandelion root tea. I like milk thistle. I like raspberry leaf tea, especially when I am around the follicular phase or the early follicular phase where I'm in my bleeding phase. I like lemon balm. You could even just be sipping on some ginger tea to help process and digest that meal and influence blood sugar too. A big one is movement, right? If we eat a bunch for our meal and then we just sit in our couches, we're gonna have some stagnation, right? And the stagnation also shows up with blood sugar levels. So helping move that blood sugar, utilize it, uptake it, has a lot to do with movement after a meal. So very important if you can start to implement some ways to have some activity after your meal. And I want to mention, we're not talking about going into a high intensity workout, right? We're talking about gentle movement. This could be doing a couple squats, maybe doing 10 to 15 squats. This could be doing calf raises. This could be cleaning up your home, tidying up the dishes, putting some things away, cleaning up the sink, the kitchen sink, the rooms, whatever it is, picking up some things, just generally moving your body to have blood flow, have muscles pumping your blood flow to help with the uptake of this glucose. So that's a very, very important one, and something you might find when you're testing your own blood sugars as well is finding what form of movement actually helps regulate your blood sugar even better. This could also be a walk outside, but depending on what meal we're talking about, that might not always work, right? So that could be something too, as well as stretching and just doing some yoga, doing a really easy flow, really awesome. And last but not least here, I'm going to throw in some things to add into your meal. These are just some things to think about, is acid into your meal. We talked about previously just bitter is better, so adding some acid to the meal. Some people like to do apple cider vinegar before a meal. Lemon juice and sea salt. Salt is another one that can be supportive of this too, because sodium chloride helps support raising our stomach acid levels, which is HCl, right? So it kind of makes sense. So having some salt, having some potassium, having the acids. You can get acid from lemon juice, which also supplies potassium, so you kind of get a bang for your buck there with both. The herbs that I mentioned and previously, cinnamon, berberine, cilantro, oregano, basil, those could all be helpful. And maybe even adding in some fermentation, right? So a lot of the traditionally prepared foods that we used to eat were soaked and fermented. They were cleaned. Our rices, our grains were soaked. So think about how you can kind of soak maybe with some half and half of filtered water and of vinegar to help with the digestion, to break down some of those hard to digest foods that we traditionally used to soak, right? And we prepared them traditionally, which helped with the absorption and digestion of them. But also fermentation, adding in some fermentation into your meals, like some fermented vegetables, can really help with adding some good bacteria that help eat up and better support and digest glucose and the absorption of it. So take these points with you, and I did promise I wanted to keep this one a little bit shorter than all the rest. So these are some action steps to take to start supporting your own specific blood sugar. And remember, we're not trying to blunt it. We're literally trying to support the ebb and flow of it without screaming towards the ceilings and without bottoming out. So really find what is unique to you, what works for you. Test some of these out, and if you want to fine tune a little bit more, actually look into your blood sugar. Start to do a finger prick, get a continuous glucose monitor, or go get some mere blood testing from your physician, for your doctor. And if you're still doing these things and you're scratching your head of like, I don't know, I'm still having all these issues, hire me.